It had been a very long time since the accident inside Demetrius's laboratory, and Ashter wasn't sure if he would ever be unfrozen. If his math was correct, he had been frozen and underground for 562 years, 2 months and 4 days. His eyes had long since stopped working, and he could feel his muscles, nerves, and senses weakening more and more each passing day. If unfrozen now, Ashter was sure he would need to relearn how to use his body correctly, though he was sure he would still be able to speak. His vocal cords were still able to produce faint hums. In addition to this, he had tried to make sounds every day over the last 562 years, so they would not fully freeze over. As he was trying to make his faint humming noises, Ashter could slightly hear something above him. It was the sound of a machine, though it wasn't one he had ever heard before. It was a deep, buzzing sound, as if whatever it was digging through the ground above with intense speed. Not long after, he heard the sound of ice being struck.
Why did the drill stop? Did we hit something? Check to make sure everything is all right down there. I can't afford to have this thing break on us again. This site is one of the oldest untouched areas. Maybe it's something from the past. Just be careful.
Ashter could barely hear what was being said as more and more noises flooded around him. Despite not being able to see anymore, he was able to tell when the darkness was shattered by sudden bright light, as if the sun was finally shining down on him after hundreds of years. The idea of finally being found made Ashter emotional. He had been alone and scared ever since the day of the explosion. Now he would not be alone anymore. Not long after the bright light appeared, the boy heard men talking in shock. He felt himself being lifted up and out of what he could only assume was a deep hole. He then heard the man's voice again, this time more clearly.
You found what? A frozen child? Bring it up here. This could be the finding of the century. Oh my, really is a child frozen in ice. Quickly get this back to the laboratory. We need to see if the child can be unfrozen safely. He appears to still be alive. There is mild eye movement. We must secure him immediately.
This man was going to unfreeze him. The thought made Ashter wish he could smile widely, and inside he was. He felt himself being loaded into something. A cart, maybe? Or could it be a crate? Ashter wasn't sure, though the sudden fast movements of whatever it was made the boy a bit scared. If he added the time he had been in the darkness underground to the last known year, the year of his 13th birthday, it would be the year 2185, 8 months after his 13th birthday. Was it really possible for it to be that year? He wouldn't get such a simple math equation wrong, so it must be correct. After thinking it over more, he realized the date must be August 25th, 2185. What kind of technology was in this time? Could he finish his father's research on the Plas marble in this time? Ashter felt extreme sadness and grief at the thought of his father. He knew he hadn't been frozen as completely as he had, so there was very little chance his father was still alive now. Maybe there would be a way in this time to bring his father back. Not back from the dead, but still, some kind of way. Before Ashter could think more, the thing he was inside of came to a stop. Not long after, he felt himself being carried off and placed on top of what he assumed was a table of some kind. Were they going to unfreeze him now? But what if something goes wrong? There is no way it could be so simple. They only just found him. Though maybe in this time it really was that simple. As he thought this over, a loud buzzing sound washed over the boy. After what seemed like ages, the young boy was unfrozen, though the process had made him unconscious.
Don't worry, Clara. The boy is all right. He just passed out from extreme exhaustion. I think his brain was too cold to stop working, otherwise his eyes wouldn't have reacted to the sunlight when he was brought up from the hole. Just give his body time to get the rest it needs. There's no way to tell how long the poor kid was frozen there. We can ask him when he wakes up, all right? For now, just watch his vitals.
Okay, Professor Fisher, if you say that's all that happened, I believe you. But still, this poor little boy, I wonder if he has any family still around. It'll be so hard for him when he wakes up. I can't imagine what he's been through. I can tell just by looking at him that he's scared and sad at the same time. I'll let you know the moment he wakes up, Professor.
Ashter slept for 2 weeks before finally opening his eyes. Though they had still not adjusted to being unfrozen, he noticed he could still make out blurry shapes and colors. After blinking a few moments, he could see slightly better, though things were still a bit fuzzy. From what he could see, Ashter guessed he was inside of a room with large objects beside him. Maybe he was in a clinic? The bed he was on felt firm but soft, and the pillow under his head was fluffy as if filled with smoke. Everything was confusing to him. He tried to sit up, but found his body was hard to control. After a few moments of trying, he managed to sit up with his back leaning against the smoke pillow. He took a deep breath before opening his mouth. It was time to see if his humming and groaning over the years had indeed helped his vocal cords stay undamaged.
Where? What? Happened? Me?
Ashter tried to ask. Clara had been facing away, looking at her computer screen when she heard a child's voice. Turning around, she let out a surprised yelp when she saw that the boy had managed to not only sit up, but also get out a few words. Sure, he had been unconscious for weeks, but this was amazing. Shaking her head a bit, she rushed over to the boy and stood next to him.
Hello, my name is Clara. My professor and his crewmen found you frozen in the ground 2 weeks ago. Try not to push yourself too much, okay? I'm just happy you are finally awake. I'll let the professor know you're awake. He wants to ask you a few things about yourself and your life before you were frozen, okay?
Ashter tilted his head a bit before understanding and giving Clara a nod. He found it mildly annoying that even though he could still use his voice, it was hard and weak. Maybe he could practice more before this professor she spoke of came to question him. Taking in a few deep breaths, Ashter closed his eyes and imagined a piece of paper with a sentence of words on it. It was the very same paper his father had used to teach him how to speak more clearly as a toddler. The words were simple enough to say, but as a whole it would take some effort. He remembered struggling for a few days with it the first time he tried to speak the words. Maybe this time he could speak them sooner.
The boy is smart. The boy is kind. The boy is mine. The boy is smart. The boy is kind. The boy is mine. The boy is smart. The boy is kind. The boy is mine. The boy is smart. The boy is kind. The boy is mine.
Clara, what is he doing? You said 3 days ago he woke up. His voice shouldn't be that clear. Is he saying the boy is smart? The boy is kind? The boy is mine? This child is very interesting. I wonder who he is.
Hello, Professor. Yes, he is amazing. The boy woke up, and after only an hour started attempting to say that phrase. It seems like he is teaching his vocal cords how to work again. It's not all he can say either, but it is the most clear. He told me yesterday his name is Ash. Though he mentioned it's not his full name, he just can't say his full name right now. Also, he claims to be born in the year 1609, and that his 14th birthday is in October. That would mean he was frozen for over 500 years, right?
562 year, 2 month, 4 day, frozen. Counted time.
Ashter replied when he heard Clara mention the time he must have been frozen for. His voice was slowly getting stronger. Soon he would be able to form full sentences just like he had before. The phrase he had been repeating was now very easy for him to say, which made him happy since it was what his father had always told him to repeat if anyone questioned him in the town. Looking at his hands, Ashter wished he could hold his father's hand again. Feeling sad, he started to tear up a bit before looking to the man standing with Clara. He wanted so badly to ask what happened to his father. Had they been able to find his body, even just his bones would make the boy feel just slightly better. Since then, he could hold a funeral for his father. Seeing Ashter tearing up, Clara walked over to him and pulled him into a hug, soothing the child in the best way she could. She knew he was overwhelmed and had tried her best to explain things to him over the last few days. Now that Professor Fisher was in the lab, he could explain in more detail what had happened to the boy.
Say you find adult bodies. One might be my pa, alive or dead. If dead, I want bury him like Ma.
Hello, Ash. My name is Professor Fisher. Yes, we did find 7 adult bodies. One was fairly close to where you were discovered, so I believe that may just be your pa. Sadly, he wasn't fully frozen, so it seems he did not survive. However, the body was still preserved well, so you can have a funeral with an open casket for him if you wish. I can thaw the body out enough for that. We can bury the others along with your father's body as well.
No, no, no. Only Pa. They from church. They caused this. They took my Pa, made me freeze, and lose 500 years. Burn him, don't bury them. Don't deserve to be buried with Pa.
The church? I know from my history books that back in those days the church was very strict about things like technology. But why on earth would they freeze you and kill your father? I doubt they would have the ability to do that in the 1600s.
They didn't, but me and Pa did. He was making a machine. Pa was really smart. I am too. They hated that. Wanted us to stop and to take me away. I hit Pa's machine when scared and hiding. That made it break and go off. I froze in place, then Pa and churchmen froze after me.
Ashter continued to explain slowly what had happened that day. About how his father had been working on the cooling device for almost a year before the accident, and also how not long after the entire laboratory had exploded, which caused him to be buried underground. The idea of those men from the church being buried with his father made Ashter feel sick and angry. They had caused him to lose the one person who loved him more than life itself. Thanks to them and their actions, Ashter was now alone. He refused to let them find peace buried in the ground. Clara and the professor listened with heavy hearts to the boy's retelling of the events that occurred on the day he was frozen. Clara had taken a seat next to him and was slowly stroking his jet-black hair as he spoke. This managed to help him stay calm enough to explain that his father was an inventor, that the church disliked his work, and that they always tried to stop them. Once he had finished his explanation, the professor placed his hand softly on his head and assured him they wouldn't bury the others with his father. They would have them cremated and then stored in containment. The funeral for his father would be after the boy fully recovered, so he could pay the man the full amount of respect he clearly deserved. He then told the boy to rest for the day, and they would discuss more things the next day. With a nod, Ashter laid down and attempted to sleep. He then felt a hand gently rubbing his chest and heard a soft and pleasant humming. He smiled a bit, realizing Clara was attempting to help soothe him into sleep, which thankfully worked after a few minutes. Even though his father was gone, Ashter was glad Clara was there. She reminded him of his mother, which gave him a sense of safety. Professor Fisher also seemed to be genuinely concerned about him, making Ashter feel like he might not truly be alone like he had thought. Who knows, maybe the professor would be interested in his father's work. Maybe he really could continue his father's legacy with the help of the professor. Ashter made a mental note to ask the man soon. Over the next few days, Ashter got better at speaking and started to tell the professor about all the things his father had tried to create. He mentioned he had the ability to take photos with his mind. Finding out this was something called photographic memory. Clara gave him a notebook to write down everything he could remember about the papers his father had written. The professor also suggested Ashter use colored pens to help organize the work so it would be easier to understand. To help Ashter understand, the man showed him some of his own research papers, which fascinated the boy.
Ash, honey, I will be going downtown today to get some stuff for the lab. You mentioned your notebook is almost full, so I'll get you a few more. Would 6 of them be enough? I can get you more colored pens too. Professor Fisher said he taught you how to color code your dad's research. Do you want me to get you anything else?
Yes, 6 would be good. I don't think I will use that many for Pa's research, but I can use them for my own in the future. Can you please get me red, green, orange and black pens? These are the colors I have decided to use while recreating my Pa's research papers. I am not in need of anything else at this moment. I appreciate you getting me things I need while you are shopping for yourself and Mr. Fisher. I do want to ask you something, if that is all right. I saw in the book of materials you gave me there is something called silicon. Is this a type of rubber? I am wondering if I can use it as a rubber replacement in a project I had been assisting my pa on before the accident.
Of course, Ash. I'll make sure to get those colors. I'll even get you a few of each. If you do think of something, just use that phone I gave you to call me. Just do what I taught you, okay? If you need help, just ask the professor. Silicon? Yes. It isn't exactly rubber, but it can be used as an alternative. Is it for that glass marble project you told me about? If it is, then you can definitely use silicon as a replacement for the rubber in the mixture, though I'm not sure what the ratio would be. But you're a smarty, so I'm sure you'll figure it out no problem. Professor Fisher and I both agree your notes so far are brilliant. I can't believe your dad came up with all of these in the 1600s. You are both amazingly smart people. You'll go far with that mind of yours. I know it.
Ashter blushed a bit when Clara called him a smarty. He never really got complimented by anyone other than his father, so it was a bit embarrassing for him to always hear how smart he was from Clara and Fisher. Though if asked, he would tell them he enjoyed it and didn't want it to stop. It helped him feel good about himself. Most of his life, he had been told so many negative things about himself and his father. It felt great to finally hear someone praising them both. Ashter had shown both Clara and Professor Fisher the research papers he and his father made for the glass marble material. The boy was shocked when he learned that even now in this age, there still wasn't something like this in the world. It seems no one else had thought to try and create it. This made Ashter even more determined to finish the research and create the material. Maybe he would dedicate it to his father? That way, everyone would know that a man from 500 years earlier had been the one to think of it first. Ashter hadn't noticed when Clara had left for town, which made him jump a bit when she tapped his shoulder to give him the notebooks and pens. After having a laugh together, Ashter showed her the newest research he had written. It was the research for the writing device he had planned to build. Clara had already explained they had machines called computers that did this and many other things, but he still wanted to write every single paper out again. It was his way of remembering and honoring his father. If it had been something already invented, he would mark the page with DCF to state Demetrius Cogsmith first thought of that device. Aside from rewriting his father's papers, Ashter was also working on something new of his very own. Professor Fisher had told him about robots and how many would create simple ones to do tasks around the office or house. This gave Ashter an idea. What if he could create a robot of his father? That way he could see him once again. He knew it wouldn't actually be his father, but still he would have some form of father figure. The research Professor Fisher mentioned was a bit hard to get, but Ashter had been told that if he can prove to the committee he could improve it or add to it, then he would be allowed to work on it. This gave the boy hope, since the idea of a person made from machinery really did fascinate him. His plan was to use the research papers from his father, as well as some of his own creation, to show that even before his accident, he and his father had ideas not yet considered. He wanted to showcase the fact that due to being a child, his imagination helped build even more creative ideas for inventions.
Clara, Mr. Fisher said if I can show the committee some of the work Pa and I did 500 years ago, I might be allowed to see the research on robotics. Do you think I can use any of the papers my Pa had already written, or should I create a new one? I am not sure what they would consider to be innovating in this age. It makes me worry they will not find my Pa's work impressive and decline my request for the research.
Don't worry. It's got nothing to do with what your dad came up with, but the fact that he thought of them 500 years ago. You have to remember that you lived with him in the 1600s. Back then, even the idea of working lights was not thought up. The fact that your dad came up with all these ideas back then is insane. The cart you told me about, or that writing machine, or even the cooling device that ended up freezing you. Sure, they weren't finished, but he still thought them up and made research papers for them. They will find it very impressive. Just remember to mention you had started working with him and that you made changes to some of the research that improved it, okay? Do that and you'll be just fine.
Ashter, my boy, I have something to tell you. It turns out the device froze more than just you and the others. It also froze some of your father's papers and inventions. I don't know if they still work, but I've told my crew to gather everything from the place we found you and to bring it all back here. But I did find this and thought you might want it right away. I assume this is you, your father and your mother? You mentioned she passed not long after you were born, so I wanted you to have this. I'll have them put the things near the stationary system, and you can look through them at your own pace. As for what Clara said, yes, she is correct. Honestly, if you just show them the research for the cart your father made to go into your village, the lighting device you improved, and that writing device, you'll get their approval. But you can go one over by showing them that research for the plus marble material you had been working on.
Thank you, Mr. Fisher. I appreciate that more than I can express. There are many things I hope will be found, but this photo is... It means a lot to me. We did not have many photos of my ma due to it being very difficult to take them back then. I find it fascinating how simple it is to take a photograph now. These phones you have are very interesting as well. I find myself wishing I could take one apart to see how it works. But I know this was a gift and I'm sure it was not cheap, so I have been stopping myself. It is the same with these computers you have now. I would love to see the insides of them.
Ha ha ha. If you want to take some of the phones and computers apart, all you needed to do was ask me, Ashter. I will see about getting you some older models, as well as newer ones. I'll even see about getting you some other electronics from over the years you can take apart. Don't forget that this section of the laboratory is yours, and you can do whatever you want here. Tomorrow, I'll bring you some phones from the last decade, as well as a computer and laptop. If I can get older versions, I will. It will just take me longer. I almost forgot. You said your birthday is in October. That's next month. What do you think about having your father's funeral around your birthday? I can set the date for any time in October, or it can be after your birthday. Just tell me a date, and we'll set it all up for you. All of my crewmen want to come to it as well, if you are okay with that.
My birthday is October 20th. I would love to have my pa's funeral on that day if you are able. Also, I would be honored if your crew members joined us for it. When my ma was buried, it was only my pa and I, so I would feel a lot better if there were more people attending my pa's funeral with me. My pa and I had been looking forward to my 14th birthday because it meant I would be old enough to become his apprentice officially.
After talking more about it with Professor Fisher, Ashter was happy knowing his father would be buried on his birthday. It was like a gift not just to him, but to the man who had loved and raised him. He wanted to make sure he had the right outfit for the funeral, but he only had a few weeks until the day. After thinking it over, he asked Clara if she could take him shopping for new clothes. Not only did he need clothes for the funeral, but he could really use clothes that weren't from 500 years earlier, or 2 sizes too big on him. With a smile, Clara agreed to go shopping with him the next day, as it was already late, and she said most shops would be closed by the time they got into the city. It turned out Professor Fisher was very respected in the research field and had a passive laboratory consisting of 4 large buildings. The one Ashter was inside was meant for historical discoveries. This amused Ashter since he himself was a historical discovery due to being frozen for so long. The other buildings were for medical discoveries, biological discoveries, and technology advancements. Ashter had learned that each building had its very own group of researcher and scientists. The professor promised he would introduce Ashter to everyone in the other buildings once he was settled down more. The one he was most excited for was the Technology Advancements building. He wanted more than anything to have the chance to speak with the people working there. The thought of being able to share his father's work with others who shared the same passion made him feel excited and giddy. Who knows, maybe someone on the team could help him with the new research paper for the plus marble material. He wanted to wait until he finished rewriting all of his father's papers before asking the professor to take him over there. Though he was almost done it, he only had a few more papers to write down, so he figured he would be able to go meet the other teams by the end of the week. The next day, Ashter woke up earlier than normal, very nervous and a bit scared since he and Clara were going into town today. He was scared things would be just as difficult for him as they were 500 years before. He feared people would look down at him or be afraid of him, but he knew he had to go into town with Clara because she wasn't sure what his size was. Ashter seemed to be a lot smaller than most his age, or at least that's what Professor Fisher told him. Apparently it was due to the lack of proper nutrition back in the 1600s that made him smaller. This seemed to explain why the clothes she had gotten him before were too big on him.
Ash, honey, are you ready to go? I promise things will be okay. You have nothing to be scared of. Things are way different now than they were back then. No one cares if you're smart. They won't see you as anything but a sweet young man with manners beyond your years. Heck, I feel confident to say people will even love and adore you. You know I do. Just be yourself and everything will be just fine. I promise.
All right, Clara, I trust you. I know you care about me and wouldn't lie just to make me feel better. While we are out, can you show me the store you get my notebooks and pens from? I wish to thank the worker there. Whoever it is always makes sure to store the pens upright when packing them and keeps the notebooks standing in the bag so they don't get wrecked. I really appreciate that since before the shopkeepers wouldn't treat the items with care knowing they were for me or Pa. A lot of the times the quills or ink jars would be broken and the notebooks torn in places. I believe they would give us ones they would not sell to the other townspeople.
That's horrible. I can't believe they would do that to you. I'm so sorry, Ash, but I promise you no one will ever do that to you again. I'm more than happy to introduce you to the shop owner. Her name is Gwen, and honestly, she's been wanting to meet you. I told her about you when I first went in for your notebooks, and every time she asks me how you are doing, I know she will be very happy to finally meet you. Even the lady at the clothing store wants to meet you. Everyone more or less knows your story, so you have a lot of people who already find you amazing and are eager to meet you. Let's go see Gwen first, then we'll go get you some new clothes. I think a nice suit for the funeral, a dozen pairs of pants, and a dozen or two of shirts should be perfect. You can pick out the ones you want, and if they don't fit, we can have them resized for you. And before you say it, no, the price doesn't matter at all. I'm using my own money that I get from my research work, so it won't be an issue at all, okay? Now let's go. I can't wait to show you around. We'll stick to the mall for today.
Before Ashter could protest to Clara buying everything, she was leading him out of the laboratory towards the mall. With a smile, he just shook his head and accepted her terms. He knew he'd never win this kind of argument against her. He was a bit scared to get onto the train, but with the encouraging words of Clara, he managed to get on board. Once it started to move, his eyes lit up and his fears vanished. This was amazing. Maybe he could learn about how these worked from the other team. There were so many things he wanted to learn about, and he had all the time in the world for it. When they got to the mall, Ashter was shocked at the size. It was as big as his entire town. There were more shops than his old town, though, and even an area filled with a bunch of shops that sold solely food. He knew he would enjoy himself here, and he was happy his first visit was with Clara. Since he was positive, she would be sure to show him all of the best places. First stop they made was to the store owned by Gwen. She was a middle-aged woman who squealed and hugged Ashter the moment he was introduced to her. Turns out she had been waiting for him to recover enough to come into the shop himself because she wanted to give him some new pens she had ordered. They were different from the ones he normally got, as they were fully waterproof. She even gave him a waterproof notebook she had put aside for him. She wasn't going to sell them yet, so she hadn't been able to give them to Clara. After chatting with her, Ashter thanked her for the items and went to the clothing store next. Again, he was hugged and greeted with warmth, which made him smile widely. He wasn't used to this, but he was enjoying it. For once in his life, people were not afraid of him or calling him a devil child.
Hi there, I'm Natasha. So, sweetie, I'm told you need a suit for your dad's funeral? I'm so sorry he wasn't frozen like you, but I'll make sure you have the best-looking suit to honor him. As for the pants and shirts, Clara told me the ones she bought for you are 2 sizes too big, so I bulk ordered a bunch of tween outfits. They are for kids between 10 and 12, so they should fit you nicely since the others were for 13 to 15 years old. You can go over there and take a look. Feel free to try any of them on, okay? If they do fit you, I'll use those sizes for your suit as well.
Thank you, Mom. I really appreciate you taking time to find clothing you think might fit me better. I had informed Clara I was all right with the other clothes being too large since most of the clothing I had received from the village was also too large or worn out, but she insisted I allow you to find better fitting clothing. The lady who worked at the clothing store in my village did not like me and believed me to be a devil's child, so when I would go for clothing she would leave a box of them outside her store. I never had the ability to look at them and pick. The idea of being allowed to not only enter your shop but also try on the clothes before taking them home makes me very happy. I will gladly try each one on and show them to both you and Clara. I do not know what type of clothing would look good on me, so I would greatly appreciate your help in deciding which ones look best on me. Also, this suit won't just be for my pa's funeral. I plan to go speak with the research committee in January, and I would like to use the same suit for that as well as any other formal appointments I might have. Oh, also, Clara said to ask you about new shoes as well. She is not sure what store here is better, so she wanted to ask you for your opinion.
Of course, honey. When Clara told me she was going to bring you here soon, I made sure to have everything ready for you. I'm so sorry you had to deal with all of that in your old village, but I can guarantee you that will never happen here. We all know what happened to you and what your life was like before. No one will ever see you as anything other than a wonderful, brilliant young man, okay? If you ever need anything, you just come to the mall, and we will all be happy to help you. For new shoes, I would recommend Harvey's Shoe Emporium. It's on the 3rd floor. Just use the escalator over there, take the one going up right beside it, then a left at the top, and you will see it at the end of the hall on your left. He is a genius when it comes to shoes, and he does this amazing deal where you can get 4 pairs of shoes for the price of 2 if you allow him to have your old pair. He'll make sure you have the best ones for your appointments and the best ones to just wear out and about.
Ashter made a mental map of how to get to Harvey's Shoe Emporium and planned to go there next. He spent the next few hours trying on all the outfits Natasha had picked for him. It seemed the women both agreed Ashter looked best in blue, black, and light blue jeans, as well as t-shirts that had more solid colors and not much detailing on them. He agreed with them since he realized jeans were a lot more comfortable than the other pants he wore. As for the shirts, he wasn't really bothered much by them. He found the t-shirts more comfortable than long sleeve, but he really enjoyed wearing the jackets Natasha had picked out. There were 4 in total: 1 blue jean jacket, 2 fabric jackets she called hoodies, and 1 leather jacket. After he decided what he wanted and getting everything measured for his suit, Ashter and Clara said goodbye to Natasha before going to get Ashter some new shoes. Just like Natasha had said, the man who ran the store, Harvey asked if Ashter would be willing to give him the old shoes and get a discount on 4 new pairs. Without hesitation, he agreed since he knew the shoes were not suited for wear anymore, so he hoped the man could get use of them. With Clara's help, he picked out a pair of dress shoes, a pair of shoes to wear around the laboratory, and 2 pairs of shoes to wear whenever he went out and about with Clara or the professor. Once they had paid for the shoes, the 2 of them stopped at the food stores to get some lunch. Being overwhelmed by it all, Ashter had asked Clara to pick something for him. He was impressed with what she had chosen for him and found it to be very good. It was something called a hot dog with fries and a pop. After eating, they looked around the mall a bit longer before heading back to the lab. Natasha had told them she would call Clara when the suit was finished.